The golden savanna quaked beneath thunderous paws as a lioness burst from the tall grass, her eyes fixed on a fleeing antelope. The wind screamed past her ears, heart pounding with primal urgency. But in a cruel twist, her paw struck a hidden burrow. The snap of bone was sickening. She tumbled violently, skidding across dirt and stone. Dust clouded the sky. The antelope escaped. Behind her, a cub cried out. The lioness tried to stand, but agony rippled through her leg. Blood seeped from the wound. She limped, dragging her body behind a thorn bush as the world blurred. Her cub pawed at her flank, mewling. From the distant tree line, vultures began to circle. The sky turned to fire as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the plain. In that moment, everything was still, except for the cub's cry and the mother's labored breath. A shrill, piercing cry ripped through the dusk, echoing across the plains. The cub's voice cracked with desperation, a sound too raw to ignore. The grass rustled faintly as it stumbled forward, its small frame dwarfed by the endless savanna. Nearby insects hushed, even the wind paused. The cub's tiny eyes searched frantically, blinking back dust and fear. "Mama!" It seemed to scream with every breathless wail, though no words came, just instinct. The lioness shifted slightly, but remained collapsed, her breath shallow, one ear twitching in recognition. But she could not rise. The cub staggered closer and buried its face against her fur, whimpering. For a moment, the world felt cold, indifferent, infinite. And yet within that cry burned something eternal, a plea not just for help, but for hope. A cry heard by more than just the wild, one destined to reach the hearts of those watching. The lioness lay motionless, breath hitching like broken gears. Her limbs twitched now and then, a primal instinct to run, to protect, but her body refused. Flies began to gather at her wound, the air thick with the scent of blood and dust. She turned her head slightly, just enough to see her cub pressed tightly to her side. A flicker of resolve glinted in her tired eyes. She tried to growl, but it came out as a rasp. In her mind she hunted still, chasing shadows in memory while her body failed her in the present. As darkness thickened, the heat of the day faded, leaving only cold. Her cub shivered against her. She knew she had to endure, if only for him. Somewhere out there, she believed, something was coming. Help, all, or death. But for now, all she could do was breathe, and hold on to that thread of maternal fire deep within her chest. Above the savanna, the wind shifted. Carrion birds rode the updraft, black silhouettes against a burning sky. One descended slightly, wings adjusting with sharp precision. Below, the mother and cub were still, an opportunity in the wild's brutal ledger. The lioness blinked slowly, her body tense beneath the weight of helplessness. She saw them, felt them, the watchers, predators of the dying. Her ears flicked, trying to track them. But she could barely lift her head. The cub looked up at the sky, unaware of the meaning those shapes held. The vultures circled again, lower. The sun's last rays gilded their feathers with false beauty. From afar, the plains looked tranquil, but nature's eye had locked in, and it would not blink until one story ended. Miles away, a lone ranger paused in his patrol truck, engine idle, binoculars raised. His name was Malik. He had heard something, a sound out of place, raw and urgent. The cry of a cub. He lowered the lenses, eyes scanning the vast plains. "That wasn't wind," Malik muttered. He adjusted the frequency on his radio, but all he heard was static. Instinct kicked in. He grabbed his kit, swung his rifle over his shoulder, and stepped out. The wind greeted him with the scent of dust, blood, and something else. Fear. Malik's boots crunched over gravel as he followed the sound. He didn't know what awaited him. A dying animal? A trap? But that cry, it wasn't just nature. It was a call for help, and he was going to answer. Malik knelt beside the fresh paw print, fingers brushing the disturbed soil. Still warm. The cry had stopped, but its echo clung to the savanna air. He tapped his radio. "Base, I need backup. Injured lioness, possibly a cub. Coordinates sending now." No reply, just static. He stood, eyes narrowing beneath his cap, scanning the land like a predator himself. His gaze locked on faint tracks, leading toward a grove of acacia trees. He clicked on his headlamp as the last light vanished. The savanna at night was a different world. Beautiful, but brutal. He moved quickly but quietly, his rifle ready, heart thudding with the weight of something bigger than duty. Somewhere out there a life was bleeding. Not just any life, a mother, a protector. And time was already slipping through their claws. Far from the chase, in the shelter of a stone den, the memory of comfort flickered. A week ago, the lioness had lain curled with her cubs, grooming them with slow, rhythmic strokes. Their tiny bodies wriggled with contentment, warmth glowing from their fur. Back then, her gaze was fierce yet gentle, a queen in her element. She had fought hyenas, endured droughts, carried life through chaos. But today that strength was fading. Yet in this memory she was whole, ears perked, tail twitching playfully as her cubs climbed her back. One nipped her ear and she responded with a mock growl that made them scatter. A mother's world, simple and savage, yet ruled by love. This memory lingered like a heartbeat, pulsing beneath the pain, keeping her alive through sheer will. Inside the ranger outpost, tension simmered. Vet Anika pored over maps and telemetry data. "She's close," she muttered, brushing her dreadlocks back as she traced Malik's location. Her colleague, Thomas, frowned. "It's too risky after dark. We can't sedate her blind." Anika's voice was sharp. "If we wait, we lose her. And that cub." The room was dimly lit by a flickering lantern. Charts of lion territories were pinned to the wall, marked with circles and dates. A tranquilizer kit lay open on the table. Syringes, vials, everything sterile and ready. Anika grabbed her pack and turned. "She's a mother. She won't give up. And neither will I." The room fell silent as she stormed out into the night, footsteps determined. Outside, the world was holding its breath. The cub, unaware of plans set in motion, nosed at his mother's cheek. His belly growled, but he refused to leave her side. He mewed again, softer this time, then lay beside her, head resting on her chest. The lioness stirred, groaning weakly. Her paw twitched, brushing over her cub, as if to say, "Stay close." The cub licked her muzzle gently, trying to rouse her. Around them, darkness grew thick, the hum of insects rising like a haunting chorus. The wind sighed through the brush, carrying the scent of predators and rain. Still, the cub stayed, his body a fragile barrier against loneliness. Though his limbs trembled, he was her shadow, her soldier, her last tether to the world. And in his silence was a message: "I'm not giving up on you." Malik crouched beneath a knotted acacia, scanning the terrain through night vision goggles. Ahead, the shape of the lioness flickered faintly, a ghost in the grass. He tapped his radio again. "Anika, visual on the mother. Cub 2, she's down but alive." Static, then a crackled reply. "On my way." The wind shifted. Malik's fingers tightened on his rifle. In the distance, a hyena's whoop echoed like laughter from hell. He muttered under his breath, "Not tonight." Behind him, the moon peeked over the horizon, washing the savanna in cold silver. Time was thinning. He didn't know if the mother would last till dawn, or if her body would give in to the wild. But he made a silent vow as he stepped forward. She wouldn't die alone. The heat was suffocating. A dry wind twisted across the savanna, turning the land into a shimmering haze. Malik, Anika, and the team had been tracking the lioness for hours, but the trail was growing colder, the heat distorting their vision. Malik wiped sweat from his brow, squinting into the distance. The blood trail had led them to a clearing, now choked with overgrown grass, the tracks barely visible. "She can't have gone far," Anaka murmured, eyes scanning the horizon. But the land seemed endless, and the time was ticking. The blood trail had dried, and the radio crackled with static. No new leads. Then, a shift. Malik saw a flash of movement to the right. He held up his hand, signaling the team to stop. The air seemed to hold its breath. The lioness was close. Very close. But whether she was still alive, they didn't know. The lioness was a shadow among the trees, her body barely moving as she dragged herself through the thicket. Malik's heart pounded in his chest. They had found her, but she was more than just injured. She was broken. Her breathing was shallow, and each step she took seemed to tear at her already wounded body. Anika moved closer, her voice barely a whisper. "She's going to collapse any moment." The cub followed behind, confused and unsure, its tiny paws skimming the dirt. The lioness had no energy to fight him off, nor could she chase away the danger that lurked just beyond the thicket. The team could only watch as she stumbled further into the brush. It wasn't just the lioness they had to save now, it was the life growing inside her. The distant sound of hyenas cut through the air, a low, menacing cackle that seemed to echo from every corner of the savannah. The rangers' nerves were on edge. Hyenas were opportunists, and they could sense weakness. Malik's hand tightened on his rifle. "We can't let them get her," he muttered, his voice grim. The team hurried forward, their boots crunching over dry leaves and twigs. Anika's eyes darted to the blood trail, and then up at the lioness, whose movements were sluggish. She was close, so close, but the hyenas were getting nearer. The tension grew with every step, the harsh sound of the hyenas' laughter growing louder, signaling the approaching danger. "Hurry," Anika urged. "We don't have much time." The sound of the drones whirring filled the air, the small camera darting above the savannah, scanning for any signs of the lioness. But just as quickly as it had started, the signal cut out. Static, then silence. Anika swore under her breath, her hand tightening around the radio. "Lost signal," she said, frustration clear in her voice. Malik clenched his jaw, looking up at the sky. "We're on our own now." Without the drone, the chances of finding the lioness in time were slim. But the hyenas were close, and the cub was growing weaker. The team moved faster, the sense of urgency deepening. Every minute that passed was a minute they could lose her for good. The savannah was no longer just a place. It was a battlefield, and every second counted. The blood trail ended abruptly, in a small clearing. The rangers stood frozen, scanning the area. The cub was now panting heavily, barely able to stay on its feet. Malik could see it in its eyes. Fear. "Where is she?" Anika asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and dread. Malik stepped forward, his heart hammering in his chest. Then from behind a thick cluster of shrubs, the lioness appeared, her body swaying dangerously. She was alive, but barely. Her eyes met Malik's, and for a moment, it was as if time stopped. Her survival instinct kicked in as she staggered toward her cub. But the hyenas were closer now. They were closing in, and the rangers were too far away to make a difference in time. Anika's voice trembled as she looked down at the thermal scans. The images flickered on the small screen, and her breath caught in her throat. "There's fetal movement," she whispered, almost to herself. The lioness, in all her suffering, was carrying new life. The scan confirmed it, not just a mother fighting for survival, but one protecting unborn cubs. Her heart pounded with new urgency. "She's pregnant," Anika said, louder now, her eyes wide with realization. Malik's face hardened as he processed the revelation. The risks of sedating her were higher now. This wasn't just about saving one life, but two. "We have to act fast," Malik said, steely determination in his voice. "She won't last long without help, but if we don't sedate her correctly..." He trailed off. The future of her cubs was now in their hands. The stakes had just escalated. The rangers gathered around, voices low but urgent. Malika, Anika, and Thomas stood at the edge of a decision that could save lives, or take them. "If we don't sedate her soon, she'll slip away. But the cubs..." Anika's voice trailed off, her words heavy with the implications. Thomas crossed his arms, looking grim. It's a risk, we don't even know how far along she is. The sedative could harm them. Malik sighed, rubbing his face. If we don't try, she won't survive long enough to give birth. We're running out of time. Silence fell between them, the weight of the decision sinking in. The lioness could die at any moment, but so could her unborn cubs. In that moment, the rangers knew there was no easy choice. The clock was ticking, and whatever they decided, the consequences would be irreversible. Suddenly, the sky darkened. The weather shifted without warning. What had been a warm, stifling night was now transformed into a violent storm. Dark clouds rolled in, and lightning cracked the sky. The wind howled through the trees, and raindrops began to fall in heavy sheets. Damn it, Malik muttered under his breath. We can't wait for this. The team scrambled, pulling on rain gear and securing their equipment as the storm intensified. But the lioness was still out there, fighting for her life, and the time to act was slipping away. Anika clutched her tranquilizer kit, looking up at the sky with determination. We don't have a choice, she said, voice firm against the gale. We're moving out. They were going to face the storm head-on, knowing the lioness couldn't wait much longer. The storm would be the least of their troubles soon enough. The cub, once full of life and energy, now lay motionless by his mother's side. He had stopped mewing, his tiny body pressed close to hers, warmth and life draining from him. His fur was matted with rain and dirt, and his small chest rose and fell in weak breaths. The lioness stirred slightly, but her eyes were unfocused, distant. Her body was beginning to fail, and her instinct to protect her cub was fading. The team was getting closer, but they were still too far out. Malik clenched his fists, feeling the helplessness of the moment. Hold on, little one, he muttered, almost pleading with the wind. The rain kept falling, each drop heavier than the last, as the life of the lioness and her cubs hung in the balance. Through the heavy rain, a shape emerged from the brush. Anika. She had reached them. With a steady hand, she positioned the tranquilizer dart, her voice soft but urgent as she called to Malik. Get ready, she said, aiming carefully. Malik held his breath, his heart racing. The storm roared around them, deafening, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. With a swift motion, Anika fired the dart. The lioness flinched, then collapsed, her body finally surrendering to the sleep-inducing drug. The cubs stirred beside her, but the battle for their lives wasn't over. We've got her, Anika said, relief flooding her voice. Now we get her out of here. The rain poured harder, but the storm was no match for the determination of the rangers. The rescue was just beginning. The hyenas had arrived. A chorus of savage cackles broke through the rain-soaked air, and Malik's pulse quickened. They were circling now, moving in closer. The lioness lay unconscious, her breath shallow, her body vulnerable. The cub had nestled beside her, weak but still alive, unaware of the danger looming. Stay calm, Malik whispered, his voice low but urgent. The hyenas sensed the lioness's weakness and closed in, their bodies low to the ground, eyes gleaming with hunger. They won't take her, Malik muttered. He stepped forward, gripping his rifle tightly. I'll hold them off, but we need to get her out of here. The tension was unbearable. The storm raged on, but the threat of the hyenas was a more immediate danger. Malik took aim, his eyes narrowing as the hyenas moved closer. The moment had arrived. Malik fired the first warning shot into the air. The sound of the gunshot cut through the storm, but the hyenas didn't flinch. They only paused for a heartbeat before continuing their advance. A second shot rang out closer this time. One hyena jerked back, but the others remained undeterred, circling in tighter, drawn to the blood and weakness in the air. Back off, Malik shouted, stepping forward to get a better shot. His heart raced, but his focus was unwavering. The rain, the wind, the hyenas, none of it mattered now. He had to protect the lioness. With every shot, he backed them up, but they weren't backing down. This was no longer just a rescue mission. This was survival. A hyena lunged forward with a snarl, and Malik fired. The shot rang out, striking the ground in front of the predator, but it didn't stop. Another hyena charged, but Malik was faster. With a rapid motion, he fired again. This time the hyena yelped in pain, retreating back into the storm. But they weren't gone yet. The remaining hyenas advanced, relentless, showing no fear. The lioness, though sedated and weak, still managed a faint growl, her body twitching, her protective instinct kicking in despite her injury. She wasn't going to let them take her cub, not without a fight. Malik fired once more, hitting the ground near the remaining hyenas. It was a standoff now, who would break first. And in the chaos of the moment, time seemed to stretch into eternity. The hum was deafening, but the sound of hyenas' claws scraping against the wet ground was unmistakable. With one final shot, Malik hit the dirt just in front of the remaining hyenas, and for the first time, they hesitated. The standoff continued for a few long moments, the tension palpable in the heavy air. Malik's finger hovered over the trigger. But then in the distance, the unmistakable sound of approaching vehicles could be heard. Back up. Dot. Relief surged through Malik, though he didn't let his guard down. The hyenas, sensing the approaching danger, began to retreat. Malik didn't hesitate. Move! He barked to the team. He lowered his rifle and ran toward the lioness. The team quickly followed, storming into the clearing as the hyenas vanished into the rain-soaked night. But the danger wasn't over. The lioness still needed to be sedated, and the rescue was far from complete. The lioness was sedated, her body limp but safe. As the team moved her onto the rescue stretcher, Malik stood by her side, his face lined with exhaustion, but also with a sense of quiet triumph. The storm was still raging, but now it seemed to be just another part of the chaos they had already endured. Anika worked quickly, securing the lioness to the stretcher, her hands moving with precision. We've got her, Anika said softly, looking up at Malik. His eyes met hers, the weight of the moment sinking in. The cub was curled up beside his mother, still alive, but barely. There was a long road ahead. As the rangers made their way back to the vehicle, the rain seemed to quiet down, and the horizon began to lighten. The battle wasn't over, but the first victory had been won. The field hospital was a world of stark white walls and the sterile scent of antiseptic. Machines hummed softly in the background, monitoring the lioness's vitals. Anika worked with steady hands, tending to the injuries that had nearly taken her life. Her breathing was slow but steady now, and the heartbeat monitor no longer beeped in erratic bursts. Malik stood a few feet away, his eyes trained on the lioness. He watched the rise and fall of her chest, his thoughts heavy. The storm had passed, and they had made it through the night, but the hardest part was far from over. The lioness was stable for now, but the future was uncertain. He had seen this before, the trauma, the recovery, the delicate balance of life and death. But there was something different about her. She was a fighter, and he was willing to do whatever it took to make sure she got the chance to fight. Outside the hospital tent, the air was heavy with silence. The world was waiting. Malik stood near the entrance, his eyes scanning the horizon, but his thoughts were with the lioness. A faint, persistent mewling reached his ears, soft, weak, but unmistakable. The cub. He turned to find it sitting at the edge of the tent, eyes wide with confusion and fear. It had followed them to the camp, never straying far from its mother, even now. Malik crouched down, extending a hand to the cub. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" he murmured. The cub sniffed his fingers but hesitated, unsure. With a soft grunt, Malik reached out and gently scooped the cub into his arms. As he stood, cradling the tiny animal, a sense of responsibility washed over him. He would make sure both mother and cub were safe. They were his charge now. The lioness stirred. The slow, shallow rise of her chest gave way to a soft, involuntary groan. Anika's eyes snapped to the monitor, and she leaned forward, her pulse quickening. For a moment, there was only the sound of the beeping machines and the soft, rhythmic breathing of the lioness. Then, a slight movement. The lioness's eyes fluttered open, and her gaze locked onto Anika. It was faint but unmistakable, a flicker of recognition. "She's alive," Anika whispered, a mix of relief and disbelief flooding her chest. The lioness's gaze softened, her muscles twitching with the effort to move. Anika gently placed a hand on her head, murmuring, "You're safe now." Malik entered the room just as the lioness shifted, his eyes meeting Anika's with silent understanding. The lioness wasn't just surviving. She was starting to recover. As the lioness began to regain strength, the team worked tirelessly. Anika checked her vitals, ensuring the sedation was wearing off gradually, and Malik stood by, watching the lioness carefully. He knew the worst of it was over, but there was still a long road ahead. The cub remained close by, its presence a quiet reminder of the fight that had brought them here. Malik had seen animals recover, but this felt different. The bond between mother and cub was stronger than anything he had witnessed. The lioness's survival wasn't just about her. It was about her cub too. If she could heal, so could the cub. As Anika checked the monitors again, Malik whispered to himself, "You're going to be okay." He wasn't sure who he was speaking to, her or the cub, but he felt it deep in his bones. The days passed slowly, but with each one, the lioness grew stronger. Her eyes, once dulled by pain and exhaustion, now gleamed with a renewed fire. She had made it through the worst, and now it was time to heal. Malik continued to check on her daily, his quiet presence offering comfort. The cub, though still weak, was also recovering. He had grown more playful, following his mother's every move. It was a bittersweet sight, mother and cub, together again, yet both scarred by the journey they had endured. As Malik stood outside the tent, looking up at the clear blue sky, he knew they weren't out of danger yet. But for the first time in days, hope flickered bright and steady. The storm had passed, and now, life was returning to the savannah. The time had come. The lioness, now strong enough to stand on her own, was ready to leave the shelter of the field hospital. The morning sun bathed the savannah in soft golden light as Malik and the team prepared for her release. The lioness stood tall, her muscles still weak but filled with purpose. She turned her head toward her cub, who had been by her side the entire time, now strong enough to follow her. Malik approached them slowly, his heart racing. He had promised he would bring her back, and now he was keeping that promise. As he stepped back, the lioness took a cautious step forward, then another. The savannah stretched out before her, a world that had nearly taken everything from her but was now offering another chance. Malik whispered under his breath, "Go on. You're free." The lioness paused, looking back at the team one last time, before she and her cub disappeared into the wild. The cub took hesitant steps, its tiny paws brushing the tall grass, but the lioness was always close by. Together they moved through the savannah, the sounds of the wild beginning to fill the air again. Malik watched from a distance, his heart swelling with pride. He had seen the lioness struggle to survive, to heal, and now he was witnessing her reclaim her place in the world. The cub, though small and fragile, mirrored its mother's every move. It was a quiet, almost sacred moment, the bond between mother and cub stronger than anything the savannah could throw at them. For Malik it was the moment he had been waiting for, the promise of a new life. The cub stopped for a moment, looking back at the team one last time, before it padded along beside its mother. And just like that, they were part of the wild again. The lioness and her cub paused near a small creek, the water rippling gently in the morning light. The cub hesitated, then took a drink, its body still trembling from the ordeal. The lioness stood nearby, her watchful eyes scanning the surroundings. Despite the peace in this moment, Malik knew the challenges were far from over. The world they were returning to was unpredictable, dangerous. But there was something in the way the lioness moved, something fierce and resolute. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. She had fought, she had healed, and now she was reclaiming her place in the cycle of life. Malik couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence as he watched her. In this vast wild world, the lioness had proven that strength wasn't just about surviving. It was about continuing to fight, no matter the odds. As the lioness and her cub ventured deeper into the savanna, the sounds of the wild grew louder. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of prey and predators alike. The cub stayed close to its mother, its senses alert. The lioness's stride became more confident, her body moving with purpose. Malik, standing in the distance, watched the pair for a moment longer. His heart swelled with emotion. He had come to see this as more than just a rescue. It had become a mission to restore balance. These creatures, once at the brink of death, now had a future. The team had done their part, but the rest was up to the lioness and her cub. The bond between them was unbreakable. The savannah had tested them, but it had also given them a second chance. Now, they were part of its rhythm once more. The lioness and her cub disappeared into the tall grass, their silhouettes fading into the horizon. Malik stood still, watching them go, his heart heavy with the weight of the journey they had shared. The savannah was quiet once more, but it was a different quiet now. It was a quiet, filled with life, with promise. The cub, once so fragile, now had the chance to grow into its own strength. The lioness, once near death, had found her way back to the wild. Malik exhaled slowly, his eyes never leaving the spot where they had disappeared. The rescue was over, but something greater had begun. As the sun rose higher in the sky, a new day began for both mother and cub. And as Malik turned to leave, he knew this was the last time he would see them. But in his heart, he would carry their story forever.